Hello, my name is James Trapani. Welcome to the final week of Australian politics and active citizenship. Today, I want to reflect on how what you have learnt and the work you have created through your portfolios will shape the Australia that we all live in for the next century. I want to think about what the value of knowledge is and also how each of us is shaped by the political and cultural world that we are inheriting. To highlight this point, I will begin with a self-reflection. I was born in 1987, which makes me much older than most of you as students. The major events that I remember from my school life were the 2000 Reconciliation March, the Sydney Olympics, early warnings about catastrophic climate change, the Cronulla riots, and of course, the awful events of September 11, 2001, leading to a protracted war against terror throughout the Middle East. When I began university in 2006, John Howard had been Prime Minister for a decade, and George W. Bush was seen as a US president completely out of his depth. Those were the days. My university years were shaped by the movements for progressive change, both here and abroad. Kevin Rudd campaigned on a platform of reconciliation with the First Australians, ultimately leading to his apology of 2008. Meanwhile, in the US, Illinois Senator Barack Hussein Obama symbolized hope and change, indicating that the US could and would be better. They could legalize same-sex marriage. They could embrace their multiculturalism. They could even elect an African to the highest office in the land, and indeed, the world. At the time I began teaching here in 2012, this hope was reverberating around the world. The Arab Spring uprisings promised to bring democracy to the Middle East. Hugo Chavez led a new generation of democratic leaders in Latin America. Democracy was thriving in Southeast Asia. Liberal rights were extending throughout the OECD, and there was great enthusiasm for the future, perhaps best emphasized by the collective agreement on climate change signed in Paris. But as the world struggled to rebound from the global financial crisis, and as China emerged as a dominant economic power in Asia, and indeed the world, a severe pushback occurred. This was best symbolized at home through the Lindt Cafe's siege of December 2014. A deranged madman, Man Monis, who was affiliated with no religious tradition and no terror organization. However, his actions led to the deaths of 2 innocent civilians and himself. This was followed in 2015 by an IS-inspired teenager that shot and killed police employee Curtis Chang just meters from the Parramatta train station. The fear of ISIL reverberated around Australia and the world. The fear was compounded by the re-emergence of Pauline Hanson's One Nation, among other anti-immigration ideas, which severely discriminated against Muslims and other migrants. The rise of anti-Islamic feeling in the West tragically played out in Christchurch when the Australian Brenton Tarrant shot and killed approximately 50 people attending Friday prayers at mosques. I vividly remember lecturing during this event and a student showing me what was happening and then dealing with the outpouring of emotions from students in the weeks that followed. This feeling was perhaps even stronger in the US. Successive terror attacks in Europe and the US created an era of fear. This was compounded by the slow recovery from the GFC and a feeling that the US was losing its status as a world power. To be fair, it has lost its status as a world power, but this can carefully be managed over time with allies to ensure a peaceful transition. However, the transition has been anything but peaceful. The emergence of Donald Trump told the world that America would care about America first and America only. Even the mention of that sent shockwaves around the world. Countries in Europe, East Asia, and of course Australia were forced to put themselves first and prioritise national security and the national economy at the expense of globalisation. Trump is a symptom of a much greater trend. His calls to nationalism were heard by a class of Americans who felt they were the losers of globalisation. And in reality, that class of people exists all around the world. It is not uniquely American. Johnson, Putin, Bolsonaro, Modi, Duterte, Jinping, Erdogan. These leaders speak of nationalism before the international community. This leads us to an economic, technological, and indeed military arms race that is eerily reminiscent of the Cold War. But hope is not lost. Even in the midst of a global pandemic, the activist youth has been speaking out against racism and calling for urgent climate action. The Black Lives Matter movement feels like a legitimate cultural shift. Time will tell, however, but it feels like the time when it was acceptable to say James Cook discovered Australia is now ending. It also feels like the era when police officers who murder a man like George Floyd can escape penalty is over. It also feels like a young generation is tired of discussing the legitimacy of climate science. With clear evidence of global warming, such as the 2019-2020 Black Summer bushfires, there seems to be more enthusiasm to create meaningful change and hold our governments to account over the issue of climate change. Here is my point. I am eternally optimistic about politics because I came to political maturation during an era of optimism. I see progressive change as signs that the world is evolving, and I see moves in the other direction as mere distractions or sidetracks. What are the events which are going to shape your political outlook? Will it be those movements who are trying to create a better world? Or will it be your frustration in a broken system? And how will these pivotal years shape your political life? The truth is that we all have a long time to live in this country and indeed this world. In the last 15 years, a dozen things have happened which I never contemplated would occur. I mean, I'm filming this at home in the midst of a global pandemic. Who saw that one coming? The ideas that you have developed in this unit and your overall political outlook will shape the lens in which you see the world. Will you be an optimist who campaigns for real and lasting change? Or will you be a pessimist who can't stand the sight of the news and therefore will have no opportunity to have a real impact on the world? The choice is ultimately yours. And the reason that I am generally optimistic about Australia and the world is because of the enthusiasm of my students. I see the work that they're creating. I see the passion, I see the enthusiasm, and I am confident that the 21st century will be much better than the 20th century, even if we do hit some speed bumps along the road. Thank you for all of your hard work in this unit. I hope to see all of my students in class in the tutorials this week, where we'll reflect on our goals for change and contemplate Australia's future.